there's scientific evidence that the brain, the parts that get activated when you're in play mode, you learn faster than when you're trying to be serious. Like people who create songs to memorize things before tests and they sing the song back to themselves. You'll learn something faster when you're playful about it than when you're serious.
Hey everyone, welcome back. We're on episode 13 here with the one and only Pamela French. Thank you so much for being here. And Pamela is a facilitation and communication expert dedicated to empowering individuals, groups, organizations, communities with over 2 decades of experience in event planning, leadership development, organizational behavior. Pamela is also Chief Empowerment Officer and co-founder of Authentic Relating Ottawa, ARO. A bit of background on ARO: they create specialized events, foster deep connections. They allow their participants to be truly seen, heard, and valued. Pamela, thank you so much for being here. Welcome to the show. We'd love to hear a bit of background on, your work and how it relates to mental health.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I really do believe that communication and belonging to each other and feeling seen, heard, and valued contributes to mental health and therefore physical health too. And that comes from roots of having grown up in a farming community in rural Ontario, Canada. So, very intergenerational kind of childhood that I was raised in, where there was lots of communication and connection and support for families and family systems. And so, when I moved to the big city, Canada's capital, Ottawa, I realized, oh, it's not the same in a big city as it is in a small farming community in terms of talking to strangers, creating those connections, and especially across generations. We tend to make friends at school or make friends at work. But if you don't go out and do other things in the community, then where do you find people and learn new things?
Yeah, those are all really good points. And I don't think I agree. Like we don't touch on intergenerational connections enough, I feel like, in like Western society and the way we do things. So I'm wondering if you could like talk a bit about and explain kind of what do you define the concept of authentic relating even is, and how does it all contribute to our mental well-being?
Yeah. So for me personally, I believe authenticity comes from a place of love and unconditional acceptance. So authentically, I believe that that's what we all want to be and receive is love and unconditional acceptance, and that people get us, that they, without trying to change us. And so authentic relating is creating ways for people to be that for others and receive it from others. And the way I do it in Authentic Relating Ottawa and the Authentic Relating communities across North America is through games. So it's very playful. And you learn these skills of talking with people and listening, which is even more important than what you say, but how you listen. So playfully, we play these games and we learn these skills of like how to really have someone feel seen, heard, and valued in your presence. And that's a remarkable gift to give anybody in your life.
Yeah, absolutely. The skill of listening itself, not everyone is able to do it, but it makes all the world of difference. Everyone just wants to be heard at the end of the day, to be, you know, you're not going to know their full story if you haven't walked in their shoes, but understood to some capacity, and listening is a crucial part there. Absolutely. And I noticed with ARO, so there was this description of a laboratory for living. And can you talk about what does that entail? How do kind of the participants engage in that environment?
Yeah, so we've always called it a laboratory for living, and this comes from my desire to invite people who want to take on being playful and try new things because a lot of the events you'll be meeting strangers. So you'll be connecting with people you've never met before. And so the laboratory for living is kind of like our motto. And so all of our events, we say, Welcome to the laboratory for living. And we invite people to try things on and take from the laboratory what works for you and leave whatever doesn't. Because I'm a firm believer that we learn from as much of what we don't prefer as we do from what we do prefer. So I don't make any promises that you're going to like your entire experience, but you will learn. And you're welcome to have preferences. We all have preferences. And as far as listening goes, I will say early on, I mean, I've been leading events for more than 11 years now, but early on, some of the games involve requiring one person to not speak and just listen for 3 minutes, and another person to just share whatever it is they want to start sharing about uninterrupted. And I can't tell you how many times people have said, I don't remember the last time I got to speak for 3 minutes uninterrupted. Just having that experience alone has been profound for some people.
Wow. It is, it's interesting to think about it. And when I wanted to think about like talking more about your games and the authentic games you host with what you do, I was wondering if you could tell us more a bit about kind of what these games look like because it's a pretty creative way to like go about this idea of practicing authenticity and building community. Like especially through or no, no one I feel like ever really thinks of making like game nights out of it. So I'm wondering if you could just talk more about like a game night looks like in yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one of my core values is play. And when I was little, I participated in a rural club called 4-H, and their motto was learn to do by doing. And as you can imagine, as a young farm girl, I did a lot of learning by doing. You just, start doing the chores and then you learn how they're done. And so that just has carried on throughout my life. And so authentic relating games nights, there's no PowerPoint or pedagogy or lessons that get taught. We just play games. I facilitate who's who in each game, give everybody roles, and I am responsible for timing. And in terms of the overall picture, we start off as together as a group. And so we'll play a game or two as a big group, no matter how many people are present. And then I usually break off into games that are in pairs or small groups like threes, maybe four, depending on how many people we have. And then sometimes I will play a game where it's just the group is divided in half. So you might be in a group of 6 or 8 people. And then at the end of the event, we'll finish with a game that we play all together again. And so it's not a networking event. You won't necessarily meet and connect with everybody that's there. We're there to connect with whoever we are in a game with. And so the nature of the games can be anything from like really silly, like somebody might say, "Oh, I'm feeling sad," and then everybody else would embody what sad looks like for them, and so they would get some reflection back of like, "Oh, when you're sad, you hunch your shoulders, but when I'm sad, like I cross my arms." Kind of thing. And so it starts a dialogue about noticing, because that's a big part of communication is noticing what's going on for ourselves in our own head, but then also having the space to listen to others share that about themselves too. Because I could say the word sad and think it means a whole world of things that you get. But when we play that type of game, it starts a dialogue of like, well, what does sad mean for you? Um, there are other games that involve more curiosity, so more questions back and forth. There's a lot of tools in the games around reflection. So, how to reflect back to people what you heard them share. And I have an agreement called Listen for the Magic. And so I invite people to train their listening to reflect back to people what they heard them share, but what was underneath what they shared. So, for example, I have a new great niece. She's 2 weeks old. I'm so excited to have a baby in my life again. And if I had 3 minutes uninterrupted to tell you all about my great niece and her father, my nephew, and his wife, and the best birthday party ever that we had for my brother last night, you would hear all of that. And then you would reflect back. What I get about what matters to you is family. Now, I never said the word family, but you would have heard all of that in everything that I shared. So that's a simple example of a game.
Yeah, that's super interesting. You're learning to read between the lines, kind of use your intuition. And yeah, it's not something where we get the chance to do that in your daily work, or typically most of us are so on the go. We don't think about giving someone 3 minutes to talk and just listening, as I like to say, active comprehension. If you're not just active listening, but comprehending what they're saying, kind of dissecting it, and yeah, super interesting to kind of tap into your intuition with that. And also, I could see that leading to more empathy, right? Like that's the beginning of understanding. So what
Because you're
is
training,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
because like empathy is such a big word these days. And I'd like to break that
Mm-hmm.
down if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, and so that active listening, we're training people to kind of leave what's in our own head. So our own beliefs and concepts about what's right and wrong and what's acceptable and not acceptable, and to put themselves and their listening over there with the other person and get what it's like to be them in this moment. Like what must they believe? What must they care about? What's important to them? What matters to them for them to be prioritizing saying this or that? And I believe that is the foundation for conflict resolution and building this world together. That we can get what matters to people without having to agree with them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, and a lot of that has been lost, the ability to, regardless of your opinions, standpoints, to come to some kind of um common ground, right? Just, come to this common ground in our human experience, regardless of your background, to whatever. I think that's super powerful, and a skill set that can be built. However, I think it's a skill set that's a need, and for you know two folks to come together regardless of their kind of standpoints. Um, what's have you seen one of someone in particular that pokes out, that's come from point A to point B, through these programs where you've really seen them transform? I don't know if you have a story about anyone who's kind of gone through that transformation.
Oh my gosh, I've so many over the years, but I'll share one to start with. So there's this game called the Giving Game, where people get to practice the skill of asking for anything that they want. And there was this game that we were playing this game in pairs. And I would say there was a woman probably around age 65 who had been coming often. So she was very comfortable in the space and very open to ask for what she wanted. And she was playing with a man who was probably around 35 years old. And he was there for the first time. So it was a new space for him, although this game was about halfway through. So he was starting to build his comfort level. And she asked him if he would lay down on the floor beside her and tell her about people in his life that he loved so that she could just listen to what he loved, who he loved, and why he loved them. And after that game completed, he shared with all of us that, quite honestly, if he had walked into a coffee shop, he never would have even noticed her, like a woman of that age, and identified her as someone to have a valuable conversation with. He was like, I just go around the world looking for like people around my age to connect with. I don't think about connecting with someone like her. And yet I just had the deepest conversation of my life with this complete stranger. He's like, now I'm going to look at everybody as an opportunity to connect deeply. And that was just in one night.
Yeah, I mean that's an entire paradigm shift, and yeah, that's incredible. Um, the kind of ageism that might exist, it's also a way to bridge that gap and yeah, you just don't know someone until you know them, until you listen. It's pretty
Yeah.
wild.
What
Yeah. And
is
I've seen marriages over time, like one partner will start coming to our events, and then the transformation that they experience and the way they start talking at home, then suddenly their partner starts coming too, and the marriages just get stronger and stronger. I've seen that happen.
Wow.
Relationships have been born. I've also had people come on first dates. You'll find out real
That's
quick whether or
interesting.
not you have something to talk about.
what is first dates to the game night is pretty funny. I'm wondering what you're talking about. It's making me think a bit about like retreats as well. I don't know if you've ever like heard stories. I remember watching some videos of people like going on these retreats, right? And like having like Wim Hof does some stuff and some people like that. And it's like life changing for them. And it seems like your event, like what you do is kind of similar to that, but like not on like a as serious of like a big of a commitment level, if you might say. Like you don't have to like fly out somewhere to like go on this retreat. It's kind of like something you do. I'm wondering, are most of your events like that you do are virtually, or is it usually in person for what you do?
Yeah, well, 11 years ago, we started out strictly in person. And then during the pandemic, we morphed to also be online. And so now I do a mixture of both. And I have been around the world. I facilitated for retreats on sailboats in Greece, which was a ton of fun. And so authentic relating itself is a perfect complement to any kind of like leadership, yoga, self-development kind of retreat because it has that aspect of relational meditation. Like you become very present to yourself and to another person inside of an authentic relating facilitated game. And so it's a great complement to anywhere. And I do lead retreats locally from time to time, but I haven't done anything in a couple of years.
That sounds super interesting. So relational meditation, could you dive a bit deeper into that?
Yeah. So if you consider that the concept of meditation is slowing down and becoming present, relational meditation would be slowing down and becoming present to you in relation to another. And so it's this uh there is you're communicating and you're activating your conscious mind so that you can speak and listen, but you are focusing in. There are blinders on being with another person, being in their world, getting their experience, and also allowing them into your world and to get your experience. And nothing else matters.
That's a really important skill, I think, that you just described, that like no one really ever masters, including like the best. I'm assuming even like yourself, you'd say like it's like hard to. It reminds me of just like being in the moment, right? Of like this with all the distractions digitally and all these different things as well. Like we're just constantly all over the place. And I wanted to talk a bit more with you about like how you think what you're doing, because I personally see like what you're doing relates to much more on a global scale than just simply even if you change the lives of the people you're working with. I think like it's an approach that we maybe need to take more as just like a country or like other countries, and like how we handle different issues and policies, right? Because like just look at, let's take politics for example, or something like that, where like everyone's kind of like your emotions are just attached to your perspective, and you can't. So when you hear a different perspective, it's like a threat. It's like a physical threat to your like safety, well-being. And I think something that like, at least for myself, one of the things that helps me like connect with people more so is because I like try to take that kind of like perspective taking, give you the benefit of the doubt, kind of like I'm come with genuine curiosity, right? So I'm talking a lot here, but I'm wondering what your thoughts are on like what you're doing on like a larger global scale, if that makes sense at all.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh my gosh. I knew since the first time I met you, we were kindred spirits.
Hmm.
And so my underlying vision for why I do what I do in the world, which right now is in Ottawa, Canada, is that Ottawa, Canada becomes the template for world peace. And as a nation's capital, this is where I am. I am blooming where I've been planted. And I do believe that when we build these types of skill sets on a personal level right now, because let's face it, work, social constructs, politics, changing the economy, those are beautiful things. And we all somewhat do them. Most of us get paid to contribute to those things. But what really matters to us at the end of the day is the people we like are directly connected to and love and care about. So when you start to improve the relational meditation and the communication in your personal realms first, then it's a natural spillover to bring that to work and to your activism and whatever else you do in the world. And so I can personally testify that these communication skill sets have greatly helped me in my career and that they work anywhere. But I think starting with people's personal lives and what really matters to them is the place to start.
Absolutely. And when you talk about world peace, obviously that's super powerful, and I can definitely see something like this playing a part in that. So I mean, does ARO have any initiatives to expand, or I guess what is the kind of the plan to expand this outside of Ottawa if there is one?
I can't say as though I have a direct plan right now. I
Mhm.
mean, other than I'd like to be consulted into spaces. I've made contact with people who work in, women's leadership out of the United Nations in New York. And I'm in like my network of people around the world are in corporate and government and bureaucracies. I've worked with the UN and before. I think personally speaking, I've been trying to do it alone. And so if there's anything I could share here, it's that I'm ready for to partner with people. So if there's anyone that hears this and they're like, "Yeah, I've got some ideas to share with you," or you can come join and link arms with my organization. I believe in world peace through communication and one authentic conversation at a time too, then would be a good fit.
Yeah, I mean, that's if there's one thing I've learned, like thus far through this, like my couple years, not even like that I've been working on my stuff is like it's hard to do it alone, like with like a pursuit like that you're working on, and any sort of like collaboration is really crucial, and you can really make it work with anyone. Like I've done like partnerships with like UPS store. Like it's like it's if you as long as you just connect, right? There's something you can do. So that's why like not to plug Skool in the middle of this episode, but I think like creating like a Skool community could always be like a cool route to go because then you can like the networking potential. I don't know, Joe, if you'd like agree with the networking like potential on Skool. It's like kind of like in my opinion is the best platform I've ever been on for like connecting with people and networking because literally everyone's in like the same boat and in trying to like grow like these things that are so hard to build and want to like make the world like better and not and avoid like kind of like this corporate kind of feel. So that's like a cool route to go. But tying back to what we were talking about, um, you mentioned like in the United Nations, and I believe you like have experience in the United Nations in Afghanistan, if that's correct. So if you could like, could you talk a bit about like how that was and how that impacted you?
Absolutely. Um, I kind of feel like I'm a cat. I'm like on 7 of 9 lives or something like that. So way back in the day, I think I was 26, 27 years old. Um, I worked in the field of emergency preparedness and critical infrastructure planning. And so I got hired to work with the security team for the 2005 democratic elections in Afghanistan at the time. And so I was just so fortunate because it was a childhood dream of mine to work in international development. And this was like the next best thing, security, but still, I was with the UN and I'm in Afghanistan. And at the time, it was deemed one of the most dangerous locations for international staff to live in and work in. And it taught me so much about what I was capable of. Um, I had this feeling like I was walking my own personal red carpet at the time because I made so many friends with Afghan nationals. We were all partnered, like it was a one for one. So my security team job was there was also someone who was born and raised in Afghanistan that was doing the same jobs because we were handing over the whole operation for the country to lead after the internationals left. And so I learned so much about their culture and what mattered to them, and and who I was in a brand new environment that was completely unknown to me. I also learned a lot about the news. I stopped watching the news after that because I would watch the news about what was happening in Afghanistan. I was like, that's not what's happening where I'm living right now. The news is not an accurate portrayal. And so, thank goodness at a young age, I discovered that fallacy and stopped believing in everything that the news had to say. And I'm still in touch with a family that helped us a great deal uh, to this day, like 20 years later. So it was a huge, important turning point in my life.
And international travel is a big one. How did it shift your perspective, when you came back to Canada and even just North America in general? I mean, how did that talk about like any paradigm kind of shift you had, or how did that change your outlook?
Well, first off, consumerism. So in
Mhm.
Afghanistan, because of the security regulations and also because of the state of the development of the country at the time, there was like no shopping. There was no, like, I think we had a list of 5 restaurants that we were allowed to visit and not very often. Like sometimes security was so tight we couldn't go out to restaurants even. And so there was no way to like consume. There was no Amazon, there was no ordering things delivered to your door. There was just nothing to consume. And secondly, electricity wasn't a given. And so a lot of entertainment, if you weren't working, was sitting around dark living rooms with candles lit, talking to whoever you lived with in the house, which is why I developed such a great relationship with an Afghan family who took care of us because they lived with us in the house. And we spent a lot of time talking in the dark by candlelight and getting to know each other. And so when there's that like I call it an old fashioned value of just like being with people and not needing to be entertained or find entertainment, then there's a lot of communication. So when I came home, it was like just heading into Christmas season, which is the height of consumerism in North America. So the contrast was stark. And that's when I realized, like, oh, my nervous system, my mental health was actually better in Afghanistan because when there was no option to consume anything, I didn't have to worry about whether or not I was making good choices or getting all the things like keeping up with the neighbors and having all the coolest things and learning all the there was just none of that. And then I came back and there was this like fever pitch of like, have you kept up with everything? Do you have gifts for everybody? Like. And so it's helped me to realize like, oh, I don't have to, I can take myself out of that game, even though I'm still living in North America. So that was the
That
biggest shift.
that is interesting topic. Like I wanted to talk about a bit more, like kind of this idea of the game, right? And like how we're all like in the way I see it is in the way like most people, I don't know, from what I've experienced, talking to most people, is most people all want the same thing to be like seen, valued, heard, loved, and playful, and like just be like a little kid and have fun. Even like you take like the top lawyers at like Harvard and all those stuff, they still are like very similar, right? Like even like I remember like hanging out with this guy in like the MLB. He had a big time job and had to be all like strict all the time. So I ask you this, like, why do you think we do things in this certain like very strict mannered way when there's kind of like another you can take the playful route as well, right? And still accomplish a lot of different things and potentially even give back more to the world, right? Because I don't know, and mine's going into a bunch of different directions, but I'm wondering your thoughts on how can you add more credibility and get people interested and kind of like what you're working on and stuff. Because if people think of like playful and stuff, they'll think like clown, right? They'll think like you're kind of like a clown, like you're not like serious about what you're doing. So you have to like manage all these expectations and people's perceptions just for the sake of what you're working on. So I'm wondering, been talking a lot. I'm wondering how you think how can someone build more credibility in this regard and help change? If this makes any sense, yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Makes total sense. It makes total sense. In fact, there's scientific evidence that the brain, the parts that get activated when you're in play mode, you learn faster than when you're trying to be serious. Like people who create songs to memorize things before tests and they sing the song back to themselves. You'll learn something faster when you're playful about it than when you're serious. So that's number one is that we could provide science to those, people who need proof as to why they should consider playing. I think the other thing is like that's why I call it a laboratory for living. So when you're going to facilitate anything, context is everything. So, how you set the context for people, which is why I say you've left your life, you're now in the laboratory for living. You get to choose who you want to be in the laboratory for living. Are you going to be somebody that tries everything on fully, like be fully self expressed? Or not. Like it's your choice, but it's a different space than your life. You don't have to be any certain way in the laboratory for living. And I think the other thing to keep in mind is that, as human beings, like you said, we all want to be seen, heard, valued, loved, playful. We also have other things in common, which is most of us, if not all of us, don't want to look bad. In fact, we'd like to look good because back in the day, if you wanted to be in a tribe that some people hunted for food and you would like count on them to like you to survive, then you would want to be liked all the time. So you would do things to be liked and fit in and not stand out or get picked on, right? And so it's part of that like human survival mechanism that we have an aversion to standing out, I believe. And so it's just like giving people a space where it's like, it's okay for the next hour to be whatever you want to be and be playful or not. It's your choice. Try it on. And then as a facilitator, it's important to just 10 times it. So, like, whatever examples I give and however I lead, I need to like really expand on my playfulness and my expressions so that it gives people permission to even like one times it for themselves.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Making that separation to where, hey, I know this is how the system works out here, but this is a place where you can simply express yourself and exist and be, and let it happen, whatever that looks like. Um, yeah, super interesting. And what are some of the, I guess, the testimonies of someone coming in with a lot of anxiety, you know, grief, depression, sadness, whatever that looks like, anger problems? Have you seen any kind of pattern of people kind of coming in with baggage and heaviness and kind of coming out a lot lighter?
Yeah, I have a lot of participants who find that just being able to talk with strangers, people who don't know them or their story, so they get to tell their story as it's true for them. And then because of the nature of the way the games are facilitated, there is no advice giving. And I emphasize to people that we're here to listen in a way that doesn't try to change people's experience. We're only trying to get what it's like to be them. We're not trying to make it better or, push them in a certain direction. We're just trying to get what it's like to be them. And so, usually, for people who are experiencing depression or sadness or grief or anxiety to any degree, they finally feel heard for what they're currently experiencing without the feeling like they shouldn't be experiencing it. Like there's nothing wrong with experiencing what you're experiencing. And I would say, like 95% of the time, the other person will then say, like, I can relate. Like, and let me tell you about a time when I felt like anxious or depressed or sad or grief. And so we're a lot more alike as human beings at our core than we realize. Often we feel very alone, especially when we're dealing with, anxiety or depression. We feel very alone. Like, why can't I be like other people and be happy and have my stuff together? And it's like nobody's happy all the time and has their stuff together all the time. Nobody. We all experience that roller coaster of life. And so that's the
Mm.
beauty of authentic relating games is that you get to be who you are and not be judged for it.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And we're coming up on the end of the podcast. Pamela, thank you so much for being here. Could you please share with our listeners where they can get plugged into ARO, into your work, and just find more about all that you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. We are Authentic Relating Ottawa on Instagram and Facebook and arottawa.ca. And I have a free ebook with 5 connection tools on my website. So if you sign up, you can get that and look forward to meeting people. DM me around town and I'm on Skool too with the Rise Up Together community.